messed it up.
What?
Don't
What?
look away.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Look
Wait,
away.
no,
I'm
no,
hideous.
we can do it. We can do it ourselves. We can do it ourselves. Come on. We can do it our rendering.
Hello. I love that. Look away. I'm hideous. Guys, welcome back to Pencil, your favorite, if I look outside, I guess, end of days podcast and live stream.
Yes.
Yeah, right. We were just kind of talking off camera. I was going to say in my head something like this, and welcome to Tatooine. Where our
I
two
saw
sons...
Mimi sent me a meme of that today, of that double sun of Luke Skywalker walking towards the double sun, on Tatooine. Yeah.
Welcome to Tatooine. I'm JAMAR NICHOLAS, one of your co-hosts for the evening. I am a cartoonist, author, illustrator, who has a very cool series at Scholastic under the graphics imprint. Go check out Leon.
Oh!
What? Look at that. With the hit. Go check out Leon the Extraordinary in stores now. Around this time next year, the next book in the series will be out. I'm very excited. If you have kids, or if you're a kid at heart, you'll love Leon the Extraordinary. I would be remiss, ladies and gentlemen, if I did not introduce my co-host, the world heavyweight champion of webcomics. He is Stone Cold, Steve Conley. What up, Steve Conley?
Gentlemen, so good to see you. Hope you're all doing great. For folks who don't know who I am, my name is Steve Conley. I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age, which you can read at middleagecomic.com. Episode 296 will be posted later this evening. So you just have 295 to read to catch up. But I won't spoil it.
You better get on that. That's
right. I think I would be remiss. Would I be remiss?
There's so much remission at Pencil to Pencil.
I'd be in remission if I didn't introduce the Tower of Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour.
Yes.
And the masked marvel of mark making, Mr. Mike Manley.
Yo, what up, Mike Manley? Yo, is there a Phantom sighting?
My little buddy, the Phantom.
I love it. Speaking of Phantom, Mike, do you have something to do with that?
Yes, I draw. Remarkably, I draw the Phantom.
Oh wow,
that's features.
That's not like a Phantom; it's the Phantom. Right, because I think
900-year-old guy in a purple suit who runs around in the jungle.
Because you know what, I think things like we do are very kind of specialized in a way that I don't think most people get. Like the Phantom is like one of the old school comic
He's the original. He's probably the first in comics, the first costumed superhero. And actually, he's not an Avenger because he's not avenging anyone. Like Batman is avenging his parents, and one of the things that always gets sort of messed up, I think, is that when people tend to do modern versions of the Phantom, he's all
like grit and teeth, and
and he's not, he's carrying on a tradition, but he's not like avenging the death of his, his father, the 20th Phantom. He's the 21st Phantom.
I say that to get into the club.
Hey, I'm number 7. Come on.
That's why I get over the velvet rope when I tell them I'm the 21st Phantom.
Yeah. But that's one of the things I taught that when I first started the strip. I talked a lot with Tony DePaul, the writer, about that, about the fact that he's not grim and gritty. So, like he sort of like how the old Batman used to smile, the Phantom smile. So,
and Mike, I had a question for you. How does that, you guys are more dyed-in-the-wool people in some fashion. How does the Defenders of the Earth thing work? Like with the Phantom and Flash. It's Flash Gordon, right? And who else? And
Yeah,
Mandrake the Magician.
Mandrake, yeah. I don't know. I've never actually seen it, so I have no idea.
And Captain Planet's in there too, right? Isn't he?
Is he? Is he?
The Snorks. The Snorks are in there.
Snorks, yeah. I think what it was all the King features.
Oh, that's it. That's the late
You know,
line.
yeah. But I've actually never seen an episode of it, so I've seen a lot of crappy cartoons, but I've actually never seen an episode of that. So I don't know how it works.
Well, Tom Zoller, America's Tom Zoller says it didn't work. So thanks for that, man.
I remember the old Filmation Flash Gordon cartoon as a kid, where everybody did this, and then they would run using that. They'd anticipate, and then they would run, and they did that with every single whoever was the character was animated first that way.
Mm-hmm.
They did every other, like Tarzan, Captain Kirk, He-Man. Everybody did that.
Yeah, and they would kind of stop like this.
Yeah.
There's always that, like one head was like 3/4 right up to this person standing right behind him. I love that stuff. Love it.
Yeah.
Notorious JRD says our buddy Jeff Parker was last to work on the collective book. Parker! I love me some Jeff Parker.
I want pictures of Flash Gordon.
Thanks, JRD. We were talking before we came on about there's so many things we could talk about tonight. Beyond the sky being on fire out here in this hemisphere. I know there are things that, and maybe I don't want to. This isn't the show we're not airing laundry. That's not what we do. But there's a lot of things just kind of shuttling around right now in the atmosphere. Like Mike had posted this old image of what was it? It was supposed to be proposed page rates. That was in the 70s, right?
Proposed minimum page rates for I guess it's 1975, I believe it was. There was a proposed minimum page rate for pencilers, inkers, writers, letterers, and colorists. When there was originally a talk of there being a union in comics, which I think was sort of pushed by Neil Adams, which of course fizzled. And then in the 90s, I attended the ProCon in Oakland, and there was talk of a union, which of course didn't go anywhere either. So I had seen that on Twitter, and it was just sort of very interesting to see like what those numbers were in 1975, right, as opposed to what numbers are now. Because page rates, when I started, my page rate at Marvel was 75. It was a little bit higher at Marvel than it was at DC. My first job at DC was Robotech Defenders. Then I went to Marvel to do an issue of Transformers, and it was 75 a page. That was 1984. So it adjusted for today's money. That was like $212 a page or something like that. So, not bad. And your dollar bought more. Like my first apartment was $300. So with one,
what, an hour? Like how?
My first apartment here, actually not too far from where I live now. My first apartment in Philadelphia was $300. It was a 2-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
And
indoor water feature.
Right. And
infinity pool.
And the thing is that one of the reasons I did move to New York when I first started was that it was way more expensive, and I didn't want to take the chance. Let's say, you didn't get enough work that, how am I going to pay my rent? Of course, now looking back, it was more expensive, but nowhere near as expensive as it is now. I think Joe Jusko, replying to post of mine on Facebook said that the average apartment in New York is well over $4,000 now, a 2-bedroom apartment. I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah.
Insane money. So yeah, I mean, I put that up just to sort of, because I see these.
You kind of started that, Mike. I mean, not to put you on blast, but like I've seen everybody pull that from you. Like
I pulled it from a guy on Twitter, who was probably pulling it from
right.
from somewhere else. But I just thought it was an interesting conversation to have, because one of the things about comics is, or a couple things about it. One is that people don't like to talk money. Everybody's obsessed with money, but people don't like to talk money because people don't want to say what their page rate is, because they don't want to hear what somebody else's page rate is, and like, oh shit, they're getting more money than me, right?
Yeah, that upsets the apple cart. Yeah,
right. And in the beginning, you didn't really know what other people's page rates were. You know, now with social media, it's really easy to find out if you can talk, because one of the, I guess that backing up, my original point for posting that rate was, those are the rates in 1975, and rates went up into the 90s and now have started going back down. So we're back in some cases to page rates that are lower than they were
in the 70s,
or back to what you were getting in the 80s, right? But of course, cost of living has gone up, probably 30% since then. You know, if you got cost of living increase, if you work for the government or something, was you like 2% a year or something like that. So over the course of 10 years, you know, if you're getting 2%, you're getting 20% more, right? Of course, you never quite keep up with inflation, but I just think that people should be aware of the cost and what you can get. I mean, I saw somebody on Facebook last month saying that Marvel was paying some guy like $40-something a page to draw something, and I just like, I can't imagine it, but I can imagine it, because, you know, the direct market numbers are not great, right? It's not a growth as far as the direct market. Graphic novels are growing, like what you're doing, like Scholastic, that's growing. But the model seems to be to do floppies that you collect, and then those get put in the bookstores or in the libraries. And so you hopefully don't lose that much money putting together the floppy, so that you make back end down the road, and then you have, you know, like you look at like Walking Dead, right? I mean, all that stuff is in print, so that's just churning, which is sort of what Rick Veitch was talking about on the podcast a couple weeks back. So I just, you know, and I get a lot of questions from young people about rates, and that always seem to be, unlike animation, in comics, rates and what you got paid was always sort of like, but in animation, which has union minimums, and you can go right now to local 839, and they will tell you on their website what the basic storyboard rate is, what a weekly rate is, what a background rate is, what a director's rate. There's a rate chart that says this is the minimum you should get paid.
I love it. But you know what? We have our guests in the green room.
Right.
Like in wrestling, he's like shaking the tag rope. He wants to get in. He's like, yo, tag me in. This is hot. Guys, I want to do a quick hello to Sean Gordon Murphy, who's in the green room, who's going to join us tonight. Mike, do you want to tell people about Sean real quick, and then I'll beam him in?
Well, I'll just do a real brief. I mean, he's really known for his Batman work, and I think he has a new series coming out, another version of Batman White Knight. So I just saw something on his Instagram page. So why don't we bring him in and talk about it?
Guys, I'm all a titter. Pause. I'm very excited to bring him in. Guys, welcome to the live stream. Sean, Gordon Murphy. Woohoo. Render. Welcome to the mothership, Sean.
Tag me in. I want to talk about rates. I want to complain about this too. Don't keep me in the back room.
All right, here you are. All right. So, Sean, welcome to the live stream. Let's just jump right into this. So, what are your thoughts on what's going on out there?
It's fascinating to hear what Mike was talking about with like the proposed rates from the 70s and 80s. And it would be nice if our rates were grew with inflation and all that, but they're not. But then, you think about comics selling millions of copies in the 60s versus now. I mean, as an artist, I want as much as I can get, but as a capitalist, I understand why there's a disconnect sometimes. And I guess for me, the question is, how do we fix this? How do we make comics more viable? Comic book movies have made billions of dollars. Comic book video games have made money off of that. They've sold T-shirts, pajamas, all kinds of license plates off of the comic book movies in the last 20 years. But comics themselves haven't made much off of this at all, which is like, what did we do wrong in a way? And I don't mean to get dramatic, or I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but it's just really interesting to me asking these questions. Like, are we just a dated medium in some way? Are we vintage records? I don't want to think that way. I mean, then manga comes in and they're selling like crazy, so that gives me hope. But it's interesting to see, like, what are they doing right that we're not getting? I just threw a lot at you. I apologize.
No, this is a great to just jump right into. I mean, it's such an interesting discussion, and kind of what Mike was talking about a little earlier. It seems like, and I feel it might be a little generational, Sean. It seems like the last generation of young cartoonists don't have the same hangups that we had.
Yeah.
Even like being shush about this kind of stuff, because woe is you get in trouble with your people because you were talking too much.
Right.
But these guys don't seem to have that problem. And they're just like, hey, what are you making? This is what I make.
Yeah.
And it started this kind of discussion thing that is really new and scary to a lot of the old guys.
Yeah.
But I thank them for that.
Yeah, a lot of young people don't want to ask because they don't want to rock the boat, and everyone here is over 40, I'm guessing. So,
yeah,
especially Mike.
Yeah,
yes.
But and I don't want to rock the boat, but I don't see the problem with asking people what they're making and trying to, it's not to like find out if I'm making more or less, or to feel like what I should be leveraging. But if we don't talk about our rates, it only helps them. Like, they like that we're scared.
Yeah, there was definitely, I think, in the old school guys, like Kirby's generation, that generation, they had a different relationship with the companies. And actually, this guy Bob Bierbaum I follow on Facebook. One of the things that kind of ticked Kirby off in the 60s, sort of eventually pushing him to leave, was, they did that Fantastic Four cartoon, and he didn't get any money for that.
Yeah.
Right? So they were taking stuff, making stuff, but nobody was getting royalties. Now, when he was partnered with Joe Simon and they were doing their own books, publishing his own comics, he was making money. But one of the things about working for either Marvel or DC is, you get 1% or 1.5% royalty as a penciler, 1.5%, I think, same as inker.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, let's say out of $1, you're getting 3%.
Right.
You're getting 3 cents out of $1, right? That is after the publisher makes their money back. right?
Mhm.
So we don't know how much money they're making. We can't audit their books, any of that kind of stuff. So it was so I do remember in the beginning, it was sort of like, well, you wanted to know what other people made, and other people would be jealous of other people making more. And of course, if you're on the X-Men, you're probably making more than the guy on Darkhawk, because
Mhm.
the X-Men sells way more than Darkhawk, right?
Darkhawk is more punk rock. I think we all know that.
But I was always very aware of that as a young cartoonist coming in, because if you read the Comics Journal, you read any of the fan press, you realize that these guys are making stuff that's making zillions of dollars, and they're not. I mean, Superman, right? Bob Kane had a lawyer. Siegel and Schuster didn't have a lawyer. It wasn't until Neil Adams
Mhm.
came along and shamed DC when that
Yeah.
movie was coming out, that they started getting money. So, people are more aware of it now, but I always say to young cartoonists, it's great to work on Batman. It's a lot of fun, but it's better to also own your own material in the long run, because if Mike Mignola had created Hellboy for Marvel, he would have lost control of it.
Mhm.
And who knows what they would be doing with it now. But you basically have, like, I have no say in what they do with Darkhawk,
Mhm.
right? Even though I co-created it, and I only get money if I draw a book with his name on it. So they might make figures and little action figures and things like that, and they actually have in the contract, you don't get money, I believe, unless the figure has 6 points of articulation.
Did you have a lawyer? Sorry to backtrack. When you created Darkhawk, did you have a lawyer go through these contracts, or did? Yeah.
No,
What would a lawyer have gotten you?
I don't know actually at that time, to think about it, if a lawyer could have gotten me
5 points of
anything.
articulation.
Yeah, I mean, it's silly, but sure,
Yeah, because you get a, it's like, hey, you want to draw this book, and I was not the first guy they asked, but I was the guy that they went with because they liked my designs the best. And it's like, oh, okay, you start off from the ground doing just like everybody else did the entire history of the medium, but then you realize later on, nobody was making movies, nobody was making TV shows. I mean, everything was really crappy back then when they did it. But now, of course, you realize, like, no, I would never create something like that for them now, because I would want to keep that idea for myself, or I would want a bigger slice of the pie. Like, I mean, you're working on Batman, so you might create ancillary material.
If it's derivative of a character, then they own it. If I create a new character that's not derivative, then I need to apply for character equity, which is something that they might not give forever. So in other words, I had 2 Harley Quinns, right? I thought, there's this Harley Quinn from the movies that's like a violent cheerleader, and there's the Bruce Timm version, which is my Harley. Why not have both? Which people have said is a revolutionary idea. I thought it was obvious when I did it. But because I created the Neo Joker, she's derivative of Harley Quinn, and it's okay. But if they ever make a movie of her, I don't own it. But I understand that going in. But if I create a new character that's out of the blue and I apply for character equity and I send in the paperwork to DC, then just like Paul Dini makes money on Harley Quinn now, and it's helpful to do that, but it's going away every year. Like, it's in their interest to not give out character equity, and it is what it is. It's a big corporation. I mean, it's not evil. That's just how they do their math in a way. But it's up to creators to push back.
That's right. Corporations go to corporate. Thanks, kidding. That sums it all up. Yeah.
Steve, you're
Yeah,
pretty
which-
quiet, man. You got to add something to the conversation, brother.
Yeah, I'm loving this. I jump. It's always double dutch. I always wait for like that moment to jump in.
I'm slowing down the jump rope just for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that you don't think about when you start out because you're just excited and you want to work in comics and you're pumped to work on, your favorite characters, but then you realize you're right over time, and then actually over the course of my career, the consolidation of all these mega entertainment corporations, and every time they merge, it works against us as creative people because there's less places to play. And this is the third version of Marvel, because there was the original version of Marvel when I started, then there was the Ron Perlman version of Marvel that went bankrupt, and now there's this version of Marvel which is owned by DC.
Sorry, owned by DC, by Disney.
I mean owned by Disney.
Yeah, and this version's about to change into a new version, probably.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Ike Perlmutter version that's about to shift, probably.
You're right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when you started out, what was your first book?
So I went to SCAD, which is Savannah College of Art. I got a major in sequential art, which is a great way to be poor. And I technically got my first gig in 2002 or 3 with Star Wars Tales with Dark Horse. They used to do that anthology thing, and it was sort of I kind of miss it. And it was $250 a page back in 2003. I know that's that's Star Wars money. But
Yeah.
20 years ago, that's pretty good even for now, and from there on, I was very new and amateur, and I wasn't that good of an artist, but I just kept plugging away at it. And I struggled and starved and made very little money for 10 years until I got connected with Vertigo. Karen Berger was running it, and I got a Grant Morrison script, and I decided to really change my style and try to make an impact. And I think that's when things started changing. That was like 2009. And from 2009 to now, I've sort of been more known and successful. And, I have a privileged position that I'm aware of. And I want to keep striking while the iron's hot, because I feel like most of us have a good career, but inevitably we have a shelf life. So I'm just trying to avoid the downfall of a shelf life as long as I can, because I know it's coming.
Yeah, I'm interested in the that pivot point where you go, I'm going to try to change my style. I'm going to try to, do you sit down and go, okay, I'm going to add a little bit from column A or column, how do you go about doing it?
So they wanted Karen, and we're friends. So, I've told her the story. So she wanted me to draw more like a house style. And I respect that there's a house style for a reason. And I can do the house style, but I just didn't want to. I wanted to be more, I was really into Jorge Zafino at the time. I really wanted to be loose and chalky and just do something different, like Ashley Wood or Sienkiewicz. But she was like, I have this book. It's Neil Young is doing it. And Neil Young really likes Cliff Chang's art. So can you just draw like Cliff Chang? And I've told Cliff this story. And I remember trying to draw like Cliff, who draws very clean. Like Cliff's really good at what he does, but it's just not what I do. So I remember telling her, Karen, hire Cliff Chang, because I don't want to draw clean like this anymore. So I submitted these pages for this Neil Young book at Vertigo, and I purposely made them as gross and chalky as possible, hoping to get fired, because I just wanted to draw like Zafino or Ashley Wood. Like I was tired of doing the house style, which was not in my financial interest, because if you can do a house style, you're kind of protected. There's nothing wrong with a house style, but it just wasn't driving with me. So I sent in these pages like, all right, here's my best attempt at being Cliff Chang, and it was not Cliff Chang at all. It was it was really raw. It's like, okay, thanks, Sean. You know, she had him colored. She showed it to Neil Young. Neil Young was like, nope. So I got fired. I'm like, thank God I got fired. And she's like, whoa, before you go, because I was getting offers from Marvel. She's like, we want to keep you here. So she gave me a Hellblazer book and this Grant Morrison book called Joe the Barbarian. And I was able to do the style I wanted on those books. So, I mean, I could say that I was punk rock and didn't want to compromise, which I guess I was, but it was a risk. I was young. They don't hear no often, you know, they don't hear that so, you know, I've sort of learned some valuable business lessons and all that. And, you know, when you have an unusual style that stands out, it could help you, it could hurt you. But my goal always was like, I want to be like Sienkiewicz or someone that stands out, or Frank Miller that can do my weird thing, but in a mainstreamy type of way and get mainstream dollars. Because I was worried about just paying my bills, you know.
You know, I think it's really interesting to talk about kind of like, I don't know, the guts of a young creator who just like, you just got your foot in the door, really, and you're making a lot of risky moves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think, you know, as we kind of talk about things in hindsight, it's like, oh wow, how come people don't ask for this? Or how come people don't do this? Is because you don't have a career yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's,
and we don't have agents or careers advisors who say, well, look, do this right now and then we'll get you this other. I mean, it's like you're sort of figuring it out as you go along. And I knew Jorge when he first came to America because he was a former student of the Villagran brothers who ran a studio, and he started out there and he was his assistant.
Wow. Yeah.
And when he came here, I met him with Ricardo, and we went up to visit Al Williamson.
Wow.
And Jorge had been doing this character called Wolf. If you guys look it up online,
I know Wolf.
It was so it sort of was more like Hal Fostery kind of. It was just beautiful stuff. And so I remember he was doing that, and he did Winter World, which was kind of real toothy and like a little Toth and a little Frazetta or whatever. And then he did that Conan job, which was like super chunky. And there was, as I understand it, was that one of the people upstairs at Marvel went like, what the hell is this? This is not what we want on Conan. You know, we want Ernie Chan, you know, or we want Alfredo Alcala, or that's what they wanted. So
they want Cliff Chang.
right.
Cliff, I love you, brother.
So there was pushback editorially on that. Of course, all the artists love Jorge's stuff. But you know, you can go outside the, outside of the pen, you know, you can escape, but you really have to have editorial behind you, and you have to have numbers. People have to buy the work.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going for a while is my parents have a business background, so I had the luck of being from a family that understands business and is good at fighting for your worth. So but I knew that one of the things I needed as I grew was I need numbers. I just need I need to be in a book that sells. I would like street cred when other artists are talking about your stuff. And the third thing I wanted was just control. I don't want to say yes to jobs I don't like, because if you're drawing something you don't like, your art's not going to come out as good. So in my mind, I had these three things that I was always seeking, and I got street cred early on, but street cred doesn't pay bills. And then I was like, well, I need a book that sells. I need a book that's like clearly does well. So I hooked up with Scott Snyder, and we did the Wake and some other stuff. So my numbers were at like 50 or 60, which is good. And after that, I wanted control, which is when I got into Batman. Was I can just say yes, no to things, and it's not that I am an arrogant person or think that I have anything to say about Batman. I just wanted to control my art. Like how many how many C- scripts can I read before I go, I think I could at least write a B-, like I don't have to be Hemingway.
Right.
If everyone was Shakespeare, I wouldn't try to be writing comics, but there's a low bar for success in writing in comics. And I know writers don't like hearing that, but it is what it is.
They don't like to hear that. No.
Sorry, writers.
And the bar is lower on
Yeah.
Batman or Spider-Man or Wolverine because they're already popular characters.
100%. It is what it is,
Mhm.
And I think the successful people understand that. And if you can have an award-winning Punisher story, good for you. If you can inject some realism and some heart and poetry into these characters, awesome. But let's be honest, like we're playing with WWF wrestlers in a lot of ways, and like I love it and I respect it, but I mean it is what it is.
Well, I mean, I think it's also very interesting because you're a little younger than me, and that generation of people who came in were more aware of that sooner, I think. Like I was aware of things because of what the business did to my heroes, like, with Kirby and Wood and that generation.
Yeah.
And then the people who came in like 10 years after me are also aware because we went through that boom and bust in the 90s where everything went way up. Artists were superstars.
Yeah.
And the whole thing collapsed. And the companies wanted to make sure that the artists would never be stars again. And so they started weighing editorial and the writers over the artists on purpose.
Yeah. Yep. I understand why they felt the need to do that. I don't think it's right, and there are people now who work at Marvel who still are mad at Todd McFarlane because but they were born in 2000. Like you weren't even alive when this happened, but that culture still exists. It's insane. And if they were better at business, they would say, why don't we hire him? Why don't we give him all the money he wants to do 4 issues of Spider-Man? Let's bring this guy back in. But they're not doing that because I don't know.
Well, I think one of the things I realized very early on was that if Marvel was willing to lose Jack Kirby, the guy that basically made them, not Stan. Stan was the great ringmaster, but Stan Lee's creative output after Kirby and Ditko left was She-Hulk, right? Stuff like that.
Right.
Kirby went on and continued to create. But if they were willing to like not keep that guy happy to make them another zillion great ideas, then they're not willing to keep anyone.
Yeah. They're short-term thinking. They're the Marvel's dictating we need quarterly numbers. You don't get to invest in a creator or a writer anymore. You don't just invest in look at this guy 12 issues. Let's see what he does. They don't do that anymore. So like it's no one's fault. I mean, no one's evil trying to be a dick. It's just how it's evolved,
Right.
So how do you think about I mean now you're not like a young Turk coming in and cutting your way in. Now you're in, but then you have to look short term, long term, right? Short term, long term, and that game is like really different now in the last 10 years.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to someone new, God, they're not even doing maxi series anymore. Everything is cut after 5 issues. It's really not in the favor of creators. I don't know how we break the stalemate. So I feel like we're in a transition right now, and we're in year 2 out of a 4-year uncomfortable transition while comics tries to figure out how do we deal with media, how do we deal with digital, how do we pay? How do we hire? How do we distribute? Do we do the direct market anymore? Like, things are awkward right now for a lot of people in comics, but I think it's a good thing because it'll force us to evolve. But I don't know. I mean, I think the people on top will be okay, but people that are just trying to get in right now, I wouldn't want to be. When I was trying to get in, actually, in 2003, it was a lot like this too. It just seemed dire. I mean, Image seemed sad. Marvel, it was still getting over the bankruptcy of 1996 or whatever. It's brutal. I mean, I guess the one thing we have now is social media and crowdfunding. So if you're really a do-it-yourselfer, digital comics, obviously stuff like that. I mean, you don't need to find a traditional publisher if you really are good at this stuff, But a lot of people need help because it's hard.
Yeah. Steve, you have a couple of questions in the wings.
Some good questions coming in the chat. Also, before I get to those, I want to ask about your style and finding your voice. It's very distinct. And was there the idea of it's I don't know. It's just it almost seems like to have that in your head and to say, okay, Marvel and DC are going to accept this feels like an uphill battle because you're saying I'm not going to draw like Cliff Chang. No, again, not Cliff Chang.
No offense to Cliff. Yeah, we all love Cliff Chang.
But you're saying, but I have a voice, and this is what it is, and this is how I want to sing, and it's really striking.
Well, so to do my thing, Hellblazer is a great playground to play with shadows and spotted blacks and crazy rendering. I was lucky to have at my first few big books that I could really do what I wanted and show people what I was thinking. So that would be Hellblazer, Joe the Barbarian, and American Vampire. So once I was able to display what I was after, I could say, how about this, but Batman? And it was a little bit easier at that point because if you just walked in the room and said, how about Batman, this on Batman, they would say no. But if you built it up slowly and ease them into it, and you have numbers to back you in any kind of way, they'll go along with it for a while. Like they'll at least give you a chance. I think that's the thing. If I tried to do my thing on Teen Titans, no fucking way.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, Batman or Darkhawk, I think those, stuff like that can showcase you well. Punisher, Daredevil. I think artists need to find the right title that spotlights them correctly. And I know young artists should just say yes to anything. But what I realized was if I say no, I did some Teen Titans and I did some stuff that just didn't fit and I needed to pay my bill. So, that is what it is. But I really tried to steer towards projects that would highlight my abilities and let me have some freedom. Stuff that was under the radar, could get to be like a cult hit. That's kind of what felt right at the time. But I'm trying to think about how you would translate that to the industry now. And I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was also very different because in that, I stopped doing monthly comics straight regular in 96 when I went into animation. But in that era, you could walk, just going up into the office, you would pick up work. Just going to a convention, you would pick up work.
Yeah.
There was, and it was, things really changed when Image came in and people started really making big money.
Yeah.
Big money. That changed the politics. That changed the inter-office politics.
Mm-hmm.
So that was all very different. It was a lot more casual.
Yeah.
So, they also had things like an annual.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you got the Hulk annual, but there was a backup, or a Spider-Man annual and there was a backup. You might try out some weird thing on a backup story that was 8 pages. Yeah. And if the editor liked it, and you got a little oomph. You don't really have those feeder books now. No,
there's no backups. Like I mentioned, Star Wars Tales a while ago was a great place to showcase indie talent. They don't do that book anymore. I think it's too bad. Even Heavy Metal magazine used to have the middle story where you had some Ham and Egger just doing his best to try, it's just black and white, no colors, $50 a page, whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, we got some questions here from YouTube. Gar on YouTube.
Gar's setting the stage here.
Yeah. Question for Sean. can you quantify satisfaction levels? This is to a third decimal between working on a beloved IP from Marvel or DC against growing your own characters. Do you like either more than the other?
No. I really love working at Gotham, but I've managed this thing where it's unique, where they allow me to do my own White Knight universe and leave me alone. Nobody gets that. So if I had to do a Batman mainline book and I had people coming in, too many cooks in the kitchen, that might not be fun anymore. And I would rather just do my Hellboy. But with what I've created with White Knight is I can do what I want. I can do the money marketing corporate move, but also still do my artistic expression, get both things at the same time. But I still want to do my own Hellboy on the side. Like I have plot holes. I have the rights to Zorro, which I know is a corporate character, but I'm doing it in a sort of an independent way. Like I always want to do like one for them, one for me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But even when you work for them, I think there's still a way to keep your integrity and enjoy yourself.
We got a follow-up question from Gar. This is going to be a couple from Gar here. YouTube question for Sean: do you hold good story ideas back from the corporate-owned books to put in your creator stuff so that you own the IP?
No. So because I'm an artist and writer, I can really do like one big book every 18 months. If I'm Scott Snyder, I have to have 5 books a month ready. So I'm not really a real writer where I could just crank this out. Because I have to draw it. Like I'm a mechanic that can sit with a script and I can make it work with art, but I'm not like a writer. When I think about real writers, it's people that just do this purely and they can do 5 a month and turn it down. And if you're that kind of writer, would you withhold your best ideas from corporations? I would guess probably. I mean, there are people that work for Lucasfilm and they draw a really great spaceship and they just put it away and don't show George Lucas. They're like, George doesn't need this one. Yeah, there's a history of people who work for corporations. They're like, no, this is a really good spaceship. Fuck George, he doesn't need this one.
Is that the modern version of quiet quitting?
Yeah, basically.
He gets the toaster designs this time.
Yeah. Ooh, a hamburger with a pickle out the side. Brilliant.
Bogart said that, wearing his second best suit for some projects.
I like that.
Oh, got another one here. Gar from YouTube
Running the table, Gar.
asks, was Plot Holes always planned on kickstarting the trade and releasing the syndicated floppies later, or the floppies a new concept that just happened?
No, so my plan was, so normally if I do a book like Tokyo Ghost, I do the floppies with Rick Remender, Image publishes it, then Image collects the trades, and then Image licenses it out to Europe. And then eventually they get around to doing these hardcover deluxe editions.
Right.
And I respect that cycle, but what I realized was I can just use Kickstarter to sell the deluxe first. And then I know the people in Europe and France who publish. So I can just say, hey guys, you want to buy this? And they can write me a check. So I don't need to give Image their cut, which is 30%. And I've got nothing against Image. Like I know they need to make money. But I realized I had the resources to do that system, but just backwards. So my plan with Plot Holes was, well, I'll do the trophy hardcover edition first, which we got like $250,000, but that's before expenses. And then I thought, well, I'll sell it to France. And my French publishers bought 17 different regions. And then I thought, well, round 3, I'll just give it to Image. So Image can sell it to France, but I've already depleted that region. So I thought that was my plan. But then I hooked up with a new company called Massive or Whatnot, and they wanted to do Plot Holes and a few other of my books. So it's the same thing I did with Tokyo Ghost, but I did it backwards because it allowed me to make more money and control it more. So I was looking for a new model where I'm like, man, crowdfunding really makes sense for some people. European distribution, like I've got a foot in there. Like there's got to be a way. So I've sort of been building a pipeline for 2 years. And with Zorro this summer, I want to really prove this pipeline to people and go, here's the new way I think we should be doing it. And then I can take these numbers and go to Mike or to any of my other friends and say, hey, if you ever do a create your own, I suggest working with Massive, because they will run your Kickstarter for you. And then you can do all these things. It's basically like, I want to build an Image competitor, and I have nothing against Image. I just feel like bringing in more competition is healthy in the long run. So this is just my attempt to try to do something new.
Yeah.
So I'm still kind of halfway through the process. I think it's working, but it's not anything new. Like I didn't invent this. I'm just doing things that have already existed and sort of, just doing it backwards, basically.
Well, that I think that ties back into what you were saying earlier, that we're in this time where, like 10 years ago, you couldn't do Kickstarter.
No.
Like 10 years ago, you didn't have all these alternative. Like in the 80s, I tried to do Wally Wood's Anyman, but I could not get the funding. I got the rights. I started working on it, but I couldn't get. Now there would be a Kickstarter, so I could have done enough pages to show on the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was really hard to launch your own book as an independent person in the direct market. It was really difficult.
I just bought a one-shot Rocketeer that Adam Hughes did. He did the cover, he did the interior, and some interiors. And then there was a Kickstarter version of the cover. So I think even IDW used crowdfunding. So on one hand, I'm like, it's a little bit embarrassing that my industry needs to crowdfund. Like, don't get me wrong, that just doesn't feel right. But there's a lot of money to be made for people that want to get in on these grassroots movements to support their comics. It is what it is. Yeah, I don't know. It's just part of this change that we're going through right now. Like, I don't love every aspect of it, but this is just what we're dealing with right now. I should write a song too. Thanks, James.
Yeah, you know what, Sean, I think it's interesting, and this is kind of just the shop talk we talk about all the time. But I think some people would be surprised to know that not everybody thinks like this.
I know. Yeah, there's more people that just, I'm an artist. I need a script. I need the company I'm just going to trust the company. People who sign contracts without really reading them. I think that's mostly what happens in comics.
Yeah. And we're not naming names. This is not about that. But have you kind of found yourself kind of on your journey through all this, found yourself frustrated with colleagues because you're like, bro, it's right here. Just let's do this. And they're like, no.
Yeah. Constantly, man. I had this. I stopped. People would ask me for advice, and I would tell them till I'm blue in the face, you should do X, Y, and Z, and they just wouldn't listen, or I'm like, here's 10 things you can do to have your own Batman universe, or some version of that might help you, and they'll be like, okay, yeah, they'll nod and they'll yes you to death. And you give them 10 things and they'll try to do 2. And in the end, they won't even do 1.
Yeah.
And it's just the way that creative people are wired. I think we just had this, like, don't rock the boat. Be grateful for what you have. Even if you get wealthy, you feel bad. You feel like you sold out. Like, you've romanticized your poverty. It's just this religion of poverty. To keep it real, to keep it punk rock. Like,
that's really real. Yeah.
There's a lot of, you're very true, because there's a lot of people, like in animation, there's so many different parts of animation, right? And if you're just a cog in the machine, you can make a very good living at a place like Disney or Lucasfilm. And that's what they want. They want that comfort. They want to go in every day, put their like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon with Sam and Ralph. They want to show up and punch the ticket, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I think that illusion of security is something that you give to yourself, where we can see now. Yeah. Again, as the pressures are ratcheted up on all these corporations to make more money and spend less money, the first people on the firing line, the first people through the chute, are always the creative people. And never the middle managers, you know what I mean? It's like the first people go are the artists. Then they start taking some of the middle managers. But
we're freelancers. We're in the line of fire. Middle managements are like contracted people with 401ks. We're easy to get rid of.
Yeah. We don't get the golden parachute.
Mhm.
I mean, I'd love to. We should, but it's. You guys see that documentary, Batman and Bill?
Yeah.
So people haven't. It's about Bill Finger, who created a lot of the stuff in Batman.
Mhm.
Bob Kane was kind of the Todd McFarlane of his time, but he couldn't draw at all. And he was mostly. I shouldn't say that because that's disrespectful to Todd. But Bob Kane was this business guy that came up with Batman, and he was just very good at being the business person, and he managed to control Batman for decades. And Bill Finger actually created a lot of concepts like the Batcave, the Batmobile, all kinds of stuff. I'm sure Mike knows more about this than I do.
Yeah.
But in this documentary, Bill died poor and Bob was a millionaire. And it's heartbreaking. And it's a story that we've seen dozens of times. But the thing that bugged me about it is that Bob Kane had made millions on the Adam West Batman. And he visited Bill Finger in his house in Manhattan. And they were in a park together. And I don't know if I'm Bill Finger's manager, I would say to him, dude, you need to push back on Bob Kane. Because what this documentary shows is your granddaughter is going to have to figure this out because you're not asking the right questions now. And I'm not trying to blame Bill for anything. I know he's an introvert and whatever. But I got to say, I mean, like when Bob Kane's making millions of dollars and you're sitting in a park outside your shitty one-bedroom apartment, why didn't you say to him, hey, asshole, pay me some fucking money? Because my granddaughter is going to have to deal with this one day. You know, Bill Finger's son didn't deal with it. It fell on his daughter or granddaughter who had this poor woman who was, righteously fought the battle. Like, it's a great documentary. But I have to put a little bit of blame on Bill for not asking the right questions. But I think there's hundreds of Bill Fingers in the industry still. And they're still getting Bill Fingered by Marvel and DC.
I like what you did there.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that part of it is I've talked about this before. I think in order to be successful, part of it is having the personality to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like a lot of people wanted to paint Jack Kirby as a victim, and I never looked at Jack Kirby as a victim. I maybe looked at him honestly as being sometimes maybe a bad businessman. But again, you have to look back at the history where you were at the time. And you go back into the 50s and how unstable the comic book business was in the 50s and the 60s. Yeah. And so maybe you go like, well, I got to feed my kids. I got to put, I got a mortgage on a house. All right, I'll draw these fucking shitty ass stories. These guys will probably be out of business in a month anyway.
Yeah. 100%.
And then, 10 years later, they're making Fantastic Four cartoons and they're doing all this other stuff. And then you go like, shit, I should have pushed Martin Goodman and gotten a better deal.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy for us to look back on those guys and go, you guys are dumb. But
no, yeah. I mean, used to sign when you signed your paycheck, there used to be a contract written on the back of the paycheck that released the rights.
Yep.
If you and I, Mike, if we're going back to the 70s and we're working, we're not going to push back against that system. We're going to sign our paychecks and we're going to get Bill Fingered just like they did. I mean, it's just a culture. It's not that we're not dumb, but it's just the way that it's wired, and I don't think the companies are necessarily evil as well, but I don't know. I try to see it from both sides, and I don't know. It doesn't make me popular sometimes. Right.
Well, I mean, you also have to look at the fact that generation of guys grew up through the Depression.
Yeah.
And they had a very, very different idea. I remember my grandparents who went through the Depression. My grandfather, in his garage, had jars of screws and nails. Any screw or nail he pulled out of a board, straightened it, put it in the little baby jar, put that up there. Those guys had a really different idea of value, of work, of again, I mean, I knew Al Williamson, and I saw just a video of him recently where he was working on Star Wars. I think he was getting $250 a week.
Wow.
$250 a week on Corrigan. I mean, he was not making. You think, okay,
Yeah.
this guy's one of the greatest guys ever. He must be a gazillionaire.
Yeah.
He made more money inking other people's work at Marvel than he had ever made before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Steve.
I think that's what's so interesting is that this is often a dire perspective on comics because it's still looking at it through the spinner racks and the direct market and all the disaster and the tumult. But those opportunities didn't exist in the 70s where we've got the crowdfunding. I mean, Wally Wood tried to do basically a
Right.
Patreon. He had the Friends of Wood. He wanted to have a subscription service where people would get his newsletters, and
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
opportunities exist now. I love what you're doing, Sean, because you're kind of using the established properties and DC and to build your own brand, right? So these projects that you're doing are elevating yourself so that you can do your own thing and
Yeah.
digging
Thank you.
into Zorro and all that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That's the attempt anyway. I mean, it's all very plastic. All this stuff's changing every year. Like just, getting the rights to Zorro 20 years ago wouldn't have worked, but it happened to work now. But if Mike Manley and I were working for Marvel in 1992, we probably would have jumped on board to do Image. We'd be millionaires right now. I mean, it's just what's going on? What are the trends? What's the culture? What opportunities do you have? What should you avoid? Advice that Mike and I would give now is just it wouldn't serve you 20 years from now. It's very fluid,
No, I mean, I remember being in Al's studio when Blevins was doing the New Mutants and he was taken off for Rob to come on. Mm-hmm. I remember how things really changed within a couple of years there when the royalty money came in. I mean, like serious royalty money, not like $500. I'm talking about enough money that guys could go buy a house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That changed everybody's attitude in the office. And there was a lot of pressure on you to kind of like, well, these guys are doing this book. This book looks like this. Why don't you kind of,
Yeah.
And like,
draw it like Cliff.
When I worked on Quasar before Darkhawk, the typical thing that always happened in the book would come out and do this for almost every comic book except for Spider-Man and a few characters, right? So I was working on Quasar and it started to do this. So they started trying to put like different cover. They had Todd do a cover. And Mike Mignola do a cover. Had Jim Lee do a cover. They were trying to do things to try to push, right? And so you are operating now within this environment where you see these different forces going on, which affect you,
right?
Affect you and affect your approach. Like you said, I want to do this style. No, man. Neil Young doesn't like that style. Neil Young, right? And that's nothing you ever started out thinking, oh, that's something I'd have to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a problem. I mean, I think so art school now costs like $50 a year. A lot of kids are getting into debt to going to art school. It's SCAD, Savannah, I think it's like $70 a year. That's what Harvard costs. Harvard, when you graduate with a degree in law, you get out of Harvard and you make $300,000 a year, hopefully. When you get all that debt at art school, you live in mom's basement. So they have the people that are teaching you are grad students who've never worked in the real world. They don't talk about business or how to do your taxes or social media. I mean, they're very ill-equipped. So I feel like we're setting kids up to fail at the collegiate levels, and it just goes from there. So you're poor for your 20s, and we now know that your brain doesn't stop forming until you're like 26. So for the last 5 years of your brain developing, you are used to being poor. So you get used to it. You never think to push back. You never think to buy a house or own property. Like it's the system is stacked against you. And Yeah, I don't know. The people that can see that what's happening and try to rise above it, it's hard.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, I've been teaching for like 20 years. I went back to school, but me going back to school at 45 is different than somebody starting at 17, 18, 19 years old. And the people at school go, oh yeah, whatever you want to do, yeah, we'll teach you how to do that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're just they're like recruiters in the military.
Yeah.
You want to fly a jet?
Yeah.
Blow up robots? Hell
Yep.
yeah, man.
The
Sure.
side
Sign right here.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I think there's only really a handful of schools that it's worth people going to. And I don't actually recommend that students go to art school now. I think
I agree.
There's enough material online. And I mean, I'm self-taught to be a cartoonist. I went back to school to learn how to be a better painter, but I'm totally self-taught as a cartoonist. Yeah, and I think you can do that.
I think most people make their biggest gains after school. I think Adam Hughes didn't go to college for this. I mean, if you could go to art school for 20 a year, sure, go to art school. But for 70 a year, get a business degree, get something on the side, and like learn art on the side, honestly. But I think parents are still caught in this thing of like, well, you need to have a degree.
Oh,
and that is true for most careers. Like if you want to be a lawyer or doctor, but for art, it's like, I don't know, like online courses. I mean, if COVID really helped us with anything, it taught us you don't need to actually go into a classroom to get a degree. And it's save a lot of money that way.
Well, also,
was it a challenge for you to convince your parents to go to SCAD?
So I got a scholarship that took care of most of it. My parents were very supportive of me doing art, but the thing was they wanted me to make money at it. And they saw that I was serious, so they were okay with it. But if I wasn't as serious or not as good, they probably would have pushed me out of it, honestly, and which is their right to do. So, but I was probably like the one student out of 100 that was got. You Mike, you teach. You can tell the 5% of students that actually can make it. But then the other 95% of students there are basically just paying for those 5 students to be there. That's just the way it is in art school.
Which is what this guy, I remember on my first day of teaching at DCAD, there was an older guy, kind of looked like a Santa Claus. And he goes, 97% of people here are to keep the lights on for the 2%.
Yep. That's
and I was like, dang.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sharp.
And I have come
in front of the brochure.
Yeah. But I have come to realize that. And the fact is that it's actually sort of criminal in a way, because they take most of these kids' money who don't have, they have the potential to be a hobbyist and to do art as a hobby or something that they enjoy, but they do not have the potential or the personality, the temperament to do it as a professional. If you have 20 kids, there might be one if they work hard enough, and you know that yourself when you meet them, because the zealot realizes another zealot.
Right.
As soon as you see them, you make that you make that connection. So did you have other students in school with you that you felt like, okay, we're going together kind of?
Yeah, there's a handful of 3 or 4 students that I graduated with who we met each other. So the nice thing about our school was it surrounds you with people that want what you want. And in Savannah, someone came up to me and they're like, well, we have this club where we do comics outside of school, so you should come. I'm like, well, I'm here to learn, so let's do it. So I go and I met people and they were like, hey, we're going to MegaCon together. It's this convention in Orlando. And I was like, what's a convention? And they described this thing to me that I'm like, okay, it sounds like a yard sale where there's editors and I know networking, so let's go. So we go, and it's like, okay, it's this giant flea market with people selling their wares, and there's editors there. And I ended up meeting Chris Warner, who's an editor at Dark Horse, and a couple other people. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, I know this. I can work with this. I didn't even know what these trade shows were at the time.
Mhm.
So I'm glad I went to Savannah, but it wasn't what I learned in the classroom. It's the people I've met. And a handful of them were very serious, gunning for it. And like two of them became colorists. One became an editor. A couple became a writer. I got a pretty good class. Like the first convention I went to, I was with Andrew Robinson,
Mhm.
who's one of the best in the history of comics. Rico Renzi, who's a colorist. Sean Crystal, who's another friend who does a lot of stuff. So I was just with the right people from day one. But it still took me 10 years to really find consistency, you know?
So
Mhm.
I'm sort of interested then. So why did you choose comics? And were you, if you were like not going to conventions as a teenager and
Yeah.
that whole thing, like how did you get wired into that?
So I was born and raised in New Hampshire, and there isn't any kind of entertainment media going on at all. So I didn't know what to do. I would buy Wizard magazine, and I saw these things happening in California, in New York, but I couldn't get there. And I wanted to be, you know, the next Rob Liefeld, or you know, because Rob made it look easy. You didn't have to draw feet. It was awesome. But I thought, you know, one day Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee and Silvestri have to die. Someone has to take their place. So I just hang on. And then I heard that there was a degree in getting art, in drawing comics. And I really just wanted to tell stories. Like, honestly, I should be a director or a film major, because mostly I just want to do movies but the reason I draw comics is because I can do a movie, but not have to bother with working with 1,000 people. I can just do it by myself.
Mhm.
So I've sort of used comics to scratch my itches, but I'm not traditionally from like I have 2 long boxes that I have in my collection. I'm not like I feel criminally unprepared for how far I've gotten in this industry, if I'm honest. And what I
Mhm.
did with Batman is I had friends who would guide me, and he's like, if you're gonna do this, read these books, because people are gonna call you out in your shit, and they're gonna know that you don't belong here.
Mhm.
So, like, I love it, but you know, I've dedicated my life to it, and I love drawing it and all that. But there's a lot about comics that I don't know, which is helpful sometimes, and a lot of times it's harmful.
Sean, I have a question about that. Do you feel like Batman pressure? Right, because well, it's like, you know, there's a million titles and characters that you guys have touched on, but
Yeah,
like Batman's different
yeah,
and the fandom is different.
yeah.
So, have you, not to tell stories, but have you had encounters where you felt like the pressure was ratcheted up a little bit more than other things you've done?
Yeah, people. My friend mentioned Detective Comics number 27, and I was like, "Oh, what's that?" He's like, "You have a fucking Batman universe, and you don't know what Detective 27 is?" And I was like, yeah,
Right, right,
sorry."
right.
But you know, I was basically, you know, basing my stuff off of the animated series, and I've read, you know, Frank Miller and the key marquee stuff to
Mhm.
prepare myself. But I've always been very transparent. Like, I love the animated series. This is an extension of that, you know. Yeah,
Mm.
but yeah, when they offered when they let me do White Knight, they didn't think it was going to sell. They thought, "Oh yeah, sure, write your weird little Batman comic, but then you got to go back to working with Scott Snyder and make some money." And when my book started to sell really well, they were like, "Oh, well, do you want to keep going?" So I
Mm.
was like, "Sure." So I kind of fell backwards into this thing that became the Murphyverse, which wasn't
Mhm.
what I called it, but that's what they called it. And at this point, I've got people who are like trying to get their own Batman universes, because they're like, oh, I want to do what Sean's doing. And the embarrassing thing is, like, I haven't read a whole lot of Batman comics, and the fact that I inherited this is pretty weird.
Mm,
And if it
mhm.
wasn't for my art and all the labor I put into it and trying to make the right moves and hire the right writers and doing these spin-off series, it wouldn't work. But I can understand why a lot of true believers in comics would be really annoyed. People who kind of want what I have and they don't feel like I've earned it. But
Mm,
that's
mhm.
just part of if you want to be if you don't want to be popular in comics, be successful. Like the best way to get people to not like you in comics is to be successful.
Yeah, I love it. I love it this
Right.
episode.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, I mean, that's like now we're in the time where everyone's going to hate all the Marvel movies, right?
Yep.
That's because they're successful now. So now, what does that mean? We're going to hate it, right? We hate Star Wars. We hate Star Trek. That's what happens. That's that weird thing that happens with fandom. And you know, if you did this in 1970, you know, there wouldn't be the pressure that there is now, because he's their one big true success they can usually always count on.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the strengths of the animated,
he blinked out. Hopefully he'll come back. But finish what you're saying, Mike. We'll act like he didn't disappear. Go ahead.
Right. One of the successes of the animated series is they pulled from the entire. The animated series pulls from the entirety of Batman. They could pull from a Bill Finger story, or a Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams story, or make up new stuff, and you didn't have to have what sort of crushes comics at the same time is continuity, right? Continuity and nostalgia run the business, right? Everybody is nostalgic for what you saw when you were a kid. That runs all of entertainment. I mean, that's what runs Star Wars. Guys my age, 61, nostalgic about Star Wars, right? People older than me, nostalgic about Star Trek. People older than them, nostalgic about Flash Gordon, right?
Yeah.
And that's what runs it. But that's also the weight around its neck. That, you're like what's his name? The guy that was the escape artist. We're gonna put all these chains on you.
Houdini.
Steranka.
Yeah, Houdini. We're gonna push you over in a barrel. Are you going to be able to dig your way, work your way out of it? Because I sort of felt when I was on Batman, when I was really super excited at the beginning, but then I felt one of the things that was robbing the joy was the fact now we have all these books, we have all the stuff, we have all these parts, and then it didn't seem to me as like, well, you just get to do a fun Batman story. You're part 7, and then there's part 8, and then there's part 9, and so that's part of what is actually saving the direct market is the aging fan base that's obsessed with continuity, right? And DC keeps rebooting their continuity. Marvel hasn't rebooted its continuity, but again, nobody was really trying to work out the logic of the fact that Spider-Man is older than I am. He'd be in his at least his 70s or 80s now, right? If he was
no one would read that.
Yeah. So I mean, the Thing wore a Beetle wig, right? I mean, it's like it. So part of that also weighs you down. But then if you reboot it, then the fans get mad and go, "Oh, well, all those comics I collected over there, you say they don't matter anymore."
Yeah.
Right. So do you feel that because you're doing almost like, I guess, like an Elseworlds, right? It's like your universe. It doesn't necessarily tie into Batman's, 438.
Yeah.
Does that give you does it lift the pressure off of you?
Yeah, it's a good people who buy my stuff sometimes say I've bought it 4 times because it's the book I give to people who don't read comics. It's an easy entry to people who don't know a lot about. They know Batman, they played the games, they've seen the movies, but they aren't steeped in continuity. So giving them White Knight Volume 1 is like a nice. It's just easy access.
It's a nice primer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you go to the shelf and you have Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. It's very clear. It's like this is why manga is killing us, is you want to read and it's all volume 1, volume 2. It's clean, clear, the same size, it's consistent trade dress. You go to Barnes and Nobles, you get 20 shelves of manga. That's very inviting. You go to the Western comics section of Marvel, it's like big book, little book not put in correctly. It's like, where's Batman this, Batman that? Like, what the fuck? I had a friend who wanted to read the Captain America Hail Hydra thing, and he's a comic book guy, and he still couldn't figure out which books to read.
Like, where is that? Right.
Yeah, it's like, hello, any marketing major, it's just insane. I've had to fight DC to try to label my books 1, 2, 3, 4, and they were against it. It's like, guys, this is what we just need to do this from now on. And they don't get it, or I don't know, they're not paid enough. They don't go to business school. I don't know what it is.
It's really different. It really is. I've always really felt that it was a very different culture, because I remember Archie Goodwin loaned me his Akira tape when he got it. And that was right before they did their adaptation of Akira.
Mm-hmm.
And you had few people like that who could see what the future was. But then you had these other people. It's like, well, that's not what we do. No, we don't, that's nice, but that's not what we do.
Yeah.
If they had embraced that in the 80s, they would be in a completely different place now, because they would be where all the manga fans are. But they were actually sort of openly hostile and sort of dismissive of that, because, well, that's not Spider-Man, that's not Batman, that's not what we do. And I can tell you, as a teacher, one of the things that the students like is, if you want to buy Naruto, you got all the Naruto you want. It's really easy to find. They don't mind that it's in black and white.
Yeah,
that's not a barrier to them, right? They're not freaked out by the fact they might have to read it backwards.
Yeah,
right.
It makes it cool.
None of that stuff is, like you said, it's either cool. And in fact, I remember in high school in the early 80s, I knew somebody was they were one of the probably early anime clubs that had somebody in Japan that would send them stuff over that they would translate here, like the tapes. Yeah, they would still be in the original format, but then they would have the translation running along the bottom. And they liked the fact that it was
subs and dubs. Yeah.
They liked the fact that it was Japanese, which is why our stuff, the imitation anime, doesn't work for them.
Yeah. Because anime is punk rock to them, because if I don't have kids, but if I did, I'd probably be like, oh, you should read Batman. And like, Dad, Batman's lame. Right. They're going to go and buy some manga. And they're going to be like, see, Dad, you don't need color. If we read it backwards, fuck you, Dad. Like, because comics are ubiquitous in movies and Batman video games, I think kids want to make their own identity. So they go to manga because it's foreign. It's different and unique, and it's cheaper. Like you go to the dollar store, you can get a One Piece for $5 for 200 pages. Like, you can't beat those prices. Like, we're just, Western comics is just setting itself up to be left behind. Like, they're eating our lunch, and they deserve it.
So would you prefer to do, instead of doing it White Knight monthly, would you prefer just to make a tome of it, like you have it all come out at one time?
Yeah, I think that'd be best. I mean, the bad part about manga is the creators don't get paid a lot. To be a manga creator, I mean, there are laws in Tokyo about renting. There are people who are landlords who have apartments, and they have signs or some. I'm happy to be corrected on this, but they will not rent their apartments to people trying to make a manga, because like 8 people pile into a 1-bedroom in Tokyo, and they work all hours of the night, and they trash the place because they love it so much they're willing to work for cheap. Very few people in manga actually make a decent living, which is the scary thing. So I don't know which no systems figured this out yet, but there's some things that they're doing right and there's some things they're doing wrong.
The only guys who really made money back in the day were the guys who did comic strips.
Yeah.
Those are the guys who probably did the best of anyone. Like, like Jim Davis or Charles Schultz made like $40 million a year for decades. I mean, he just made, those guys made money out of more than animators, more than, and they were celebrities in their day. It's sort of hard for people to understand that now.
Yeah.
I don't know any comic book dudes who have golf carts. So I think you're right on that. Hey, I wanna switch gears for a second, Sean. I want to check on you. How you doing?
Good. I actually need to use the bathroom, so I'm going to take a 2-minute break, but I'll be right back.
Yeah, why don't you take a break and then we'll do the lightning round and we'll get you out of here. All right.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So I'm very happy to report that this is probably, since the Walt and Wheezy episode, the highest viewed episode that we've done live.
Wow.
So thank you everybody for checking in with us. Sean will be right back. He's taking a bio break. But I would implore all of you who are in love with the content tonight to like and subscribe. We do this every week, you guys.
And to share, because this is evergreen.
Yes. That's also an important thing. So if you are watching this live, it'll live on at the same URL that you were watching it at. Share it with your friends, put it on your wall, take a picture, it'll last longer. So thank you guys so much. So when Sean comes back, we're going to do a lightning round, and Mike, I want to get him out of here. So there's a bunch of questions that are queuing up. So we'll work on that. And if there's any kind of like last minute love letters, there's a lot of really nice sentiments happening. I'd like to see some more of those. Go ahead, Steve.
For folks who are new to the channel, a little bit have another station ID, perhaps. Pencil to Pencil Live. We're here every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. That's JAMAR Nicholas, Steve Conley, and Mike Manley. And you can find each of us at Jamar. Where can people find you online?
You can find me at my IG is really lame now, but Jamar. I got nuked, so I had to start over. So it's Jamar _Nicholas _cartoonist. And I'll put Mike's IG up here. I don't think I have mine up here. You can find Mike on Instagram as well. Steve, webcomic to middle age. Look at all those places you can get it. Check out my Patreon. Check out Mike Manley's new merch shop. Look at that. We're going all in. But yeah, this is great, guys. Thanks so much. And also, we have a really rich archive. This is our fourth year we've been doing the
fourth year.
And all this stuff lives on our channel, and then we also have a Facebook page that goes beyond when we started this. So there's lots of content, guys. So get on that. Why don't you? Thank you, Sean. How you feeling? You good? All right. I'm gonna bring him back in. Hey, how you feeling?
Hey. Much lighter now that I peed.
Good. I saw you starting to vibrate. I was like, let me check on my man here.
Oh, thank you. Can I say before we get into the lightning round? So I've been a fan of Mike's for a while, and I studied his Nightfall series and his Darkhawk, obviously, when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
But I was drawing the Azrael stuff with the Asbat suit, and I have never seen Asbat drawn as well as what you did, and I was trying to
Thank you.
So when I did this homage splash page in Curse of the White Knight, and I've never done homages before, where I basically like swipe what someone else does, but it's okay because you write their name on it.
Right.
And I think I contacted you and I showed you first. They're like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing of this book. You don't know me," and you're like, "Yeah, it looks good." So thank you for that. But I'm going through your art and trying to match what you did, but do my own spin on it. It was so fun to do that. And
thanks.
What I love about that version of Azrael is he has these weird leg spikes that make no sense unless it's comics. And what I realized was what I like about this medium is you can do things that animation and film can't do. And I think that was so cool about, I know the 90s, people joke around about Azrael's shoulder spikes and it makes no sense, but it really is fun because that's one thing comics can do that other things can't do. So I tried to lean into that when I drew your version of Asbat.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, and that was designed by Joe Quesada, and that was it was one of the things that was actually, I mean, it was sort of a struggle in the beginning to figure out, because Joe draws differently than I do.
Yeah.
So you try to make, well, how does that shape, how does that shape work? And the things like the spikes on the legs, it immediately catches Cape.
Yeah,
Right?
it's ridiculous.
Right. So, and one of the things that was a struggle for me in the beginning on Batman, and I didn't really think about it, was that Batman is really about design. It's about shape more than anything else.
Yeah.
And I was really obviously influenced by Aparo and Neil Adams especially. And so when I was doing my thing, I had to sort of like really work on playing around with the shape. And sometimes you have to, the shape rules over reality, rules over the fact that okay, if this guy had this big shoulder thing or whatever, he wouldn't be able to see anything, right? Right. So you just sort of started playing around with the shape, and that's what I love about your stuff, is that strong sense of shape and design, which does not date. That's the stuff that does not date. Rendering can date, but shape and design do not date as fast as rendering.
I saw a great breakdown of Toth once, and it talked about how he drew these characters. And if you just drew the outline, he didn't just draw a guy driving a car, it was a hot rodder. He had this Elvis haircut, and the way that he made the shape more interesting, it was a big lesson for me. And I think about the 90s. I feel like a lot of costumes were designed. This looks great if he's facing the camera and not putting his arms up. But so the Batman, the ankle spikes, or the fact that Azrael could not do this with his arms, it doesn't fucking matter. It looks awesome. And then when you and I have to draw, it's like, oh my God, so Azrael's reaching, he has a metal thing that wouldn't let his arm go. How is this gonna work? And it's so dumb because readers don't care. Just make it look cool. Right. You got to find a way to bend the metal and hide it. That's part of the fun, I think, of it.
Yeah, and that's what I think. Later on, when I was looking at guys like Jim Aparo, he had a great way, I think even more than Neil Adams stuff, of really playing with those shapes, playing with the shapes of his head, the cowl, the cape, and I mean, that's the kind of fun stuff that you can have on it. I mean, that he and Spider-Man are the two best character designs ever in comic books.
I think so too, man. Yeah, you can't. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought, man.
I just want to shout out to so I was trying to find a way to comment on the comments, but I don't know how, so I accidentally closed out. But thank you for Garhide, thank you for your love. I see
there's a lot of love.
George Haig and Mussolino, friends of mine, so I appreciate you guys. Spikes on the shoulders were like rearview mirrors. That's fucking hilarious, actually. So when I was drawing Azrael, who has these 3 spikes sticking out that shoot these threads, basically like this tattered tape, I tried. One of my regrets in the design my redesigns of the characters, I'm mostly happy with what I did, but I regret how I handled Azrael's shoulder spikes. And I tried to draw these metal feathers that held the cloth in place. I'm trying to think about if you were going to make this suit in real life, what would it look like? And I realized the reason I was doing that was because comic book movies are a thing now, and we don't get to think about tights anymore. We have to think about Kevlar and body armor and how you would actually make these things. just think about how Iron Man was drawn forever until I almost said Robert De Niro. Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, thank you. Now Iron Man has to be like technically like an engineer has to draw him, which is cool for other reasons, but it's definitely a shift. So when I was drawing Azrael's shoulder spikes, I tried my best to make them work, and I have like a 3/4 down shot and trying to make these spikes work in perspective. It was a mess. And what I realized, and I had to go back to what Joe Quesada did in the Azrael book, Sword of Azrael, I think it was don't overthink it. Just draw it differently each panel and make each panel work separately. Like you don't have to have consistency with these designs. Just make it look good. Just go for shape and don't try to overthink how these things actually work in real life, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. Because even if you did him as a 3D thing, they would have to come up with special ways, special poses, special things because of the way. Like the wind would always have to be blowing his cape.
Yeah,
they'd have to cheat things in order to make it look cool, and that's the whole thing. Is you just want to make it look cool,
right? Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, you guys. All right, we're going in.
How many people do we have watching right now?
I think we're close to, well, we're spread across a couple of things. I believe there's like 40-something people on YouTube right now.
Nice.
But those numbers jump as we go along. So now we are going to do now I can't find the thing. The lightning round. So the lightning round, Sean, is where we just try to bang out a bunch of questions from the room.
Let's do it.
So yeah, I mean, you can embellish a little bit, but let's try to keep it breezy.
Yep.
All right, let's go. So Jason Moore from YouTube says, Sean, did you let your style just develop over time on the published work only, page by page, or did you spend lots of time studying and filling sketchbooks with pieces inspired by Topi and others?
Both. At first in my career, I was trying to just find a style that I could do a page a day. And then stage 2 was I will try to do a house style because I want to get work. And stage 3 was, man, I really like Topi and Zaffino and Bill Watterson and Rick Leonardi and Mike Manley and these people. I was trying to find a way to like take my favorites and blend them into a new thing. And I was also a fan of people like Chris Ware and a lot of indie guys. And what I realized was I like Chris Ware, but I can't use that in my stuff at all. So I had to like close the door on a lot of influences that I had because I just like the ones that I boiled down to was like Toth, Zaffino, Topi, Bill Watterson, because a little bit of cartoony is. So I just tried to find a way to like blend those 4 people into one style. And then I try to find a way to find books that would allow me to do that. And then page by page, this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. I tried to have every page be a B+, the best I could. Like sometimes you got a stinker and you got a deadline, you just got to let it go. And you're going to look back on your work and realize that it's not what you wanted it to be. But I just tried to raise the bar in myself every year. So I would try to steer my style towards certain things, but like sometimes I'd try to steer it to too much to Ashley Wood and it wouldn't work. So I had to stop. It's I don't know.
I love those analogies with driving cars.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Did you ever redo a page because of that?
Oh God, yeah. I've ripped pages up. I maybe like once a year I'll redo an entire page. Like I got a Zorro page right now that's bugging me, and I'm thinking about ripping it up, starting. And for like 2 months now, I'm like, should I just tear it up?
Oh, we have a Zorro question, so this is perfect. Show Lifer, Eternity Forever says it's brilliant that you have Zorro rights. How'd that happen?
So I congest this. I love Zorro. Someone at Dynamite asked me if I wanted to do Zorro with Frank Miller. And I said, well, Zorro will be 100 years old. Do you even need the rights anymore? Can I just do Zorro without Frank, without you? I didn't say this to that person. So I called my lawyer and I was like, what's the deal with Zorro? So I had her check it out. And on the website, ZPI, Zorro Productions, Inc., who are actually really good people. Very clear that they don't give it out to third parties. But I also saw that they were publishing through American Mythology.
Mhm.
So I wrote to these people. I had my lawyer write to them and say, my client, Batman, done this, done that. And he really wants to do Zorro. He could probably make you a lot more money on Zorro than what you're making doing, with American Mythology. No offense to them. And they agreed to have a conversation. So I showed them some spreadsheets and I said, I think if you give me Zorro, I can do this with it. And they agreed. Yeah, so I don't have the exclusive rights. I have, I have it. Dynamite has it, or American Mythology. I don't know.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I'm doing 4 issues of this, and I'm gonna use Kickstarter and go through massive. I'd love to get covers to do variants. I'm gonna bug Mike for a cover at some point. I'd also like to get Mignola or Frank Miller to do variants with these Whatnot auctions are pretty hot right now. So I'm just kind of gonna feel it out. But Zorro is pretty appropriate too, because that's where Batman comes from. So doing Zorro, I mean, you can kind of, it's all kind of in the same, on the same umbrella. But yeah, Zorro is kind of experiment. And like, I love Zorro. I don't know how popular he is overall, but I feel like there's a way to reinvent him and spin it in a way that can work. You know what I mean? Whereas if Zorro is being put out through American Mythology, that's great. But I feel like there's a way to do a high-end version and put a book together that has a lot of back matter and charge more for it to people that would be interested, that the direct market isn't doing.
I love it.
I find it interesting that you would think that he would be public domain by now.
Yeah, well, it's 100 years old. Technically, the first time Zorro came out was called a book called the Count of man. I think the alcohol is hitting me. The something of Capistrano. It was a novel that came out 100 years ago. But Zorro was not wearing black. He was wearing like red and green. He didn't have a Z. He didn't have Tornado. All the things that you know about Zorro are unrecognizable. So if you wanted to do a book about the Count of Capistrano, you could technically. Just like you can technically do Winnie the Pooh right now. But you better be careful and you better have lawyers ready, because they're going to litigate to protect their property, which is their right. But as Disney bought the rights and Disney let go of the rights, and it's like unclear who created the black suit, who created the Z, Tornado, the whip. Like it's 100 years old. So of course it's kind of a clusterfuck. But ZPI seems to have locked it all down, and they're actually very easy to work with. And I was worried that when I got involved that they would be micromanaging me. They're not. Yeah, I when I'm finished, I'm going to ask them if they own any other properties, because licensing can be tricky.
Yeah.
And depending on the licensor, if they're very agreeable and easy to work with, that makes all the difference.
All right. Back to it. All right. Also, there was a question. Gar wanted to know, when is that Zorro project coming out?
So the Kickstarter launches in October. It'll be called Zorro Man of the Dead, which is appropriate because it's Day of the Dead in October. I'm going to be launching. I'll be in San Diego. We'll have more. I should have a QR code and other stuff right now for the Kickstarter, but I don't. But I'll get all that stuff together. So October will be our big launch. But after the Kickstarter is over, if you like to buy from your LCS, we're going to have it through the direct market as well, with a different set of covers. Hopefully with a Mike Manley cover.
All right.
Sure, no problem.
No problem. You're on record.
Yeah.
The Curse of Capistrano. Someone pointed it out to me. Thank you.
Yeah, Sue said that.
Thank you, Sue.
Dom says, how long was it before you started inking your own work? And do you wish you started inking your own work earlier? Good question.
Thank you. I've always inked my own stuff. When I was in college, this is how ignorant I was. So I stopped reading comics in like 1995 when the Image people were millionaires. And I just assumed that that's how it was until 2002. I had no idea there was a market crash or that Marvel went bankrupt. So I'm in class, I'm about to graduate, and somebody tells me, oh, you didn't hear about the big crash of 1995, 96? And I go, what? Because last I heard, Rob Liefeld was making $2,000 a page. And they're like, well, yeah, but that's not how it is anymore. Like, it's like poverty level out there, and it's bad. I'm like, really? Because I hadn't really read a lot of comics. I mean, again, I'm admitting my ignorance here. I just like to draw. So I was like, fuck, I don't want to be poor. So maybe I'll just ink my own stuff, because then I can like collect a double rate. I'll be a writer. Sorry, I'll be a penciler and I'll be an inker. So that's like really the only reason why I started inking, was because I just thought it was a way to protect myself. And then later on, I decided to start writing as a way to protect myself as well.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dom. Good question. Then we have, we're almost there. We're getting there. So William Morales III says, were you asked if Batman White Knight could be in Batman 900? It was strange. Every important Bats was in it, but not yours.
I don't remember if they asked me or not. It wouldn't surprise me if they boycotted me out of spite. I feel like there are people who are in their 20s reading my Batman now, and one day they will be in charge of DC, and then they'll come to me and be like, oh man, I grew up reading your stuff. Can we use your White Knight? Right now, the people who control things are annoyed that I have something that they don't. So they're probably not going to include me. But I think as time goes on, you'll start to see my Batman universe getting mixed into the fold. So I think you'll see my Neo Joker being worked in and some of the other stuff. I mean, as multiverses become more ubiquitous, I think it's just bound to happen. But I think the reason why I might be shut out of some of those other books is just petty jealousy.
Oh, that's a really good answer. And also, William has another question. Plot holes 2 in the works. Do you wish you would have done anything differently in plot holes? More action scenes, or would have that made it longer?
Well, William, you're right. I always should be adding more action scenes to my stuff. I don't know why I keep getting mired in plot. And I keep thinking, like, I'm just going to do a simple story about Batman. So he's the bad guy and Joker's the good guy. So I started to write it, and I think it's just going to be an action story, an excuse to draw Batmobiles. And then I'm like, well, I should say something about Trump, or I should talk about this and that. And I start throwing more things in there, so my scripts get very crowded. But you're right. I wish that I did have more action scenes, and I'm trying, like even with Zorro today, I'm writing a script. I'm like, no, more splash pages. Stop adding plot. Just give people what they want. Give them WWF.
That's all right. We're still cage matches, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, if I remember, one of the criticisms Toth had of working on the Zorro series was the plots were from the TV show, and they were very heavy. There was too much stuff, not enough Zorro.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. You know, it's funny. I don't even know where those pages are. I think there might have been a fire. So, because I've been trying to buy a Toth Zorro page, and they don't exist.
Maybe they didn't return them, or who knows? Maybe he threw them out. I mean, I know that a lot of stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
A lot of stuff was not returned.
Yeah.
Back in the day, like if you worked for Dell, I mean, a lot of great art.
Yeah.
They didn't, and a lot of the guys actually didn't ask for it.
Yeah. They didn't think it was worth anything. I mean, you had people using their original art pages to line their bird cages.
Cutting boards. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the rumor that Ditko supposedly used.
Yeah.
Those old pages for like a cutting board or something.
Well, so Bruce Jones was an artist and a writer. He used to work for EC Comics. And he was telling me once that when he would go into the Marvel offices in the 80s, he would just get a list from his friends and be like, hey, can you go in the back room, grab my artwork, and just bring it? He would just do it. He would just steal it. And like, they didn't seem to care. I mean, they should have mailed it, but they didn't. It was, I don't know. It's the Wild West. It was crazy.
It was just stacked up on the copier. Yeah.
Yeah. Like now we know millions of dollars of paper and ink just sitting there, just being grabbed. Yeah. Wild.
Hey, Steve, do you want to knock out the rest of these questions?
Absolutely.
Sure.
We have, well, it's touching back on school again. What does Mr. Murphy think about mentorships for artists as opposed to going to art school? That's from Michael on YouTube.
That's great. I used to have an apprenticeship that was a mentorship, but You got to find the right mentor and the right artist to do it, and the right environment to do it. I think if it's a cheap alternative, so if you're looking for education and it works for you, sure. If you're looking for a degree, obviously that won't work. But I think a lot of the reason people are successful in this industry is they hook up with like-minded friends, and you send each other your pages and you critique each other and try to help. You're a mentor to an equal, and they're a mentor to you. This seems to be the nature of it.
That's great. Hey, Gar on YouTube. I think we got another one from him in the queue as well. Can you list like 3 to 5 artists, students of comics should really look at for inspiration, etc.?
Well, so to recap what my 5 are, it's Zafino, Topi, Toth, Bill Watterson for me, and throw in Rick Leonardi or Al Williamson.
Very cool.
Because that 5 is different for everybody, and then it even changes in your life.
100%.
Like I can think of like who were my 5 when I was 15.
Yeah.
Are not necessarily my 5 now.
Right.
And you can discover somebody. I mean, especially now. I mean, there's things you can discover now. Like if you type in Topi.
Yeah.
10 years ago, it wasn't that way.
It's funny. So I think most artists have Mike, you probably have by your desk a stack of art that you cycle through more frequently, but then you have on a shelf stuff that you like, but it's just not as close to you. Do you have like a short pile and a long pile?
See?
All right. So that's your long pile. But what's right next to your desk though?
Right next to my desk is
that your Kniff up there? Is that what that one is?
That's my Frank Robbins on the wall.
That's your Robbins, yeah.
Yeah. I have a long box, but I don't really look. What I found now is I don't look at. I look at more stuff online. I'll buy stuff and look at stuff online. What I'm interested in now is maybe a little bit different than I was when I was drawing monthly comics. I was very interested in what everybody else was doing at the same time, because I'm swimming in the pool. They're swimming in the pool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Doing the strips, I've been studying more strips, especially on the Phantom, because it's this classic strip. So I'm always looking at that. If I was back in the pool doing a monthly Marvel, I would probably then look more at stuff. But I'm also trying to pull more from my head now, because my influences are in there. And maybe you'll get to this point too. Your influences become nature, and then, well, what is Sean, right? Because you can always say, here's Sean on Topi, here's Sean on Toth, here's Sean on Safino. But eventually, you want Sean on Sean.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, you know what? That's actually the thing I needed to hear right now. Drawing Zorro, I realized I've been trying to draw Toth, and it's fucked me up. I have a issue done. I'm going to redo some pages, but I was trying so hard to steer my style towards Toth that it was hurting me. And I think I can take a little bit from Toth. I shouldn't try to steer too much into it, because there's a reason why people buy my stuff, and I need to just start trusting my instincts. And I think as we get older too, like I don't see John Romita Jr. trying to reinvent himself. I think there's a point where our style's our style, and this is a good thing. And we just like reinventing your style is a young man's game. And as we get older, I think we should just explore what we're doing and just keep pushing that envelope. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And I think each subject matter, allows you maybe to deviate, to push in a different way. I always think of somebody like Mobius, because you had the amazing Lieutenant Blueberry stuff. Then he had the Mobius stuff. And then the later Blueberry stuff was different than the
Yeah.
first Blueberry stuff, but it's
Right.
all Giro.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we got a couple more here. We got Rob on YouTube says, "You model yourself after your artwork. The characters look like you."
I wish I was as cool and chiseled as Bruce Wayne, but I'm not. I just hide it. Yeah, I think all artists look like their stuff in some way.
And
Yeah.
batting cleanup, no surprise to anyone. We got Gar on YouTube. Sean, thank you for your devotion to your craft. Love your work, and it's so inspirational to see what can be done with storytelling. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a great channel. I've never met Mike. I've been a fan for a while, and coming in cold, like I'm glad that you're a good listener. A lot of people just want to talk, but it's very rare to find a creator that asks questions and listens. So I try to do that too when I'm interviewing people. So yeah, thanks for your patience.
Well, we're so happy that you agreed to do it, and to me that's really the reason. To be honest, it's one of the selfish reasons I like to do the podcast with these guys, and why I did the Draw magazine is because I'm so interested in the craft. So if I can talk to you or Eric Larson, I learn by getting your perspective on things, because like I said, I taught myself how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still teaching myself how to do this.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is such a powerful and unique and personal art form, especially when you talk about guys like Toe or Kirby. Yeah. Those guys were really like universes and schools unto themselves.
Yeah, man. I can't say enough about it. It's funny. I see all of your animals walking around in the background.
Yeah, it's like dog walking time now. Yeah.
I see you silence you see your kids yelling in the background.
Yeah, it's just like...
I just wanted to maybe before we go out is talk a little bit about your rig, your setup, your techniques, your
Yeah, I'm pretty old school, honestly. I use Raphael 8404 brush. I'm starting to use a calligraphy nib to render like scratchiness, because it glides over paper differently than a crow quill will. I like deleter nibs. I bought a whole bunch in bulk because under COVID they were hard to get, so I just bought 1,000 of them. But it's like basically a crow quill, but it's made in Japan, and the Japanese are better at doing everything.
Yes,
Japanese steel, like from Kill Bill, right? And I've been playing around with Kali ink. I feel like it flows pretty well from nibs and brushes both, but it ages. I didn't realize this, but you're supposed to keep ink once it's opened in a refrigerator because it's organic and it's like food, and it'll start to get gross after a while, which I only learned now.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, when you get a fresh bottle of ink, it's just smoother, and the reason is because it's organic and it's eating itself. So you want to technically keep it in a fridge, which I don't. I mean, I use so much ink, I just throw it out when it gets bad. And when I switch to a new bottle, I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I switch sooner? This is amazing. And because I'm cheap, I'm like, no, I'll make this brush work one more day, or I'll make this quill. I spent $3 on this quill. I don't know what happened. It's my cheap Scottish upbringing, or I don't know what it is.
What kind of paper do you like?
I like semi-smooth Bristol. Here. So this is what I buy. It's 500-pound press. They stopped making this under COVID. Yeah. Or there was a company. Bristol was owned by I forget the name of the company. I'll think of it later.
It wasn't Being Fang or whatever those guys were.
Yeah,
or something like that.
So someone bought this company, and under COVID, they only produced plate and rough, but they kept selling semi-smooth. And I noticed the difference because I'm trying ink on this shit. So I'm going to like art marts and all these art stores telling them feel this paper. This is different. Like, you're selling this stuff. You're selling semi-smooth. This is not semi-smooth. This is plate. I look like I'm insane. And I have to take days off. And I'll drive down to Boston, which is 2 hours. And I go to art stores and I'd open it and I'd feel the paper to make sure it was semi-smooth. Because I need 3 things to work. I need ink. I need ink material, like a brush or a quill, and I need paper. And if I don't have one of those things, I cannot make money. So under COVID, I would go to these different art stores trying to figure out what the fuck is going on with papers. And I called the company. I called Bristol, and I was like, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a big deal at DC, and the paper that you're putting out isn't." And they're like, "Oh my god!" And so they caught this factory mistake because of me. And then they sent me like 12 pads of paper as a thank you, Canson.
Oh,
Canson,
so yeah.
So Canson bought Bristol or something, and there was some kind of, they dropped the ball in whatever happened. It's fixed now, but there are still pads of paper floating around that say semi-smooth, but they're not. And I figured it out.
Wow, that's
You're welcome.
It's like, you're welcome.
Yeah. It's like nerding out on paper in a way that, Canson bought. Oh, Strathmore owns Canson now. Okay. That's the correct way to say it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sean, what about a digital throughput? Are you a Cintiq guy at all, or is it all paper and pen? All right.
Nope. I have a bamboo tablet, and this is as digital as I go.
I love it.
Well, I mean, most of my money is made selling original art, so I can't afford to go digital. Yeah, we can get into that next time. But yeah.
Well, I think we have to have a part 2 if we can wrangle you to come back on again. We'd love to have you.
Sure, after Zorro.
Yeah, like a little into the near future. We'd love to have you back on. This would be really great. And we'll end with this. Eternity Forever says, "You're the real art knight detective." I love it.
Put that on my tombstone.
That's right.
The 40 people that are here right now, you're the only ones that are going to get the joke.
I love it. Well, Sean, it was great talking to you. Where can people find you online? I know we've been pimping your Instagram tonight. Any other places?
That's all I have. No, I shut down my Twitter account. I'm not on Facebook. So just Instagram.
All right, I love it. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to get out of here. We got to walk dogs and put babies to bed. So thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight.
Mike, Steve, Jamar, thank you so much.
Thank you. Hold on, Sean. You can't leave. We have a thing we do before we go.
All right.
All right. You got to do it too. So for my co-host and our guest tonight, Sean Gordon Murphy, we had a great time. And now we're at the end times, you guys. The sky is the color by Studio.
That's right.
I would be remiss if I didn't tell you guys to wash those Kirby hands. Let's see some Kirby hands, Sean. Put them up. There you go. That's a nice one. You got to get some flat fingers. There it is.
Okay.
There you go.
Got it.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. See you next week.